All right, welcome back. And I'm your host, Mark. This is Realize the Self. And in today's episode, we're going to go over a really cool concept called force versus finesse. And you could think of this as force versus flow or force versus acceptance. But we're going to call this force versus finesse. Same thing. So, have you ever noticed that the harder you try to change your life, the more stuck you feel? You push, you grind, you force discipline, confidence, success, and somehow it slips further away. What if the problem isn't that you're not trying hard enough, but that you're trying too hard? Today, we're going to talk about force versus finesse and how understanding the difference can trigger real self realization. So, force and finesse, they're not just strategies, they're states of consciousness. One comes from fear and control, the other comes from awareness and alignment. The moment you recognize which one you're operating from, your entire relationship with yourself changes. So, what force really is effort driven by resistance. It sounds like I have to fix myself. I can't be like this anymore. I need to become someone else. Force comes from the belief that who you are right now is not enough. And this is false. Who you are right now is enough. Who you are right now is perfection. So you, with that false belief that you being not enough, you suppress emotions, override intuition, ignore exhaustion, compare yourself constantly. And yes, force can produce results, but they're brittle. You get discipline without the peace. You get success without fulfillment. You get confidence that collapses the moment pressure hits. Force doesn't lead to self-realization. It leads to self-conflict. And so you see this a lot with what's prominent in society, in videos and social media. You get all this encouragement for self-discipline, for all this success, to make more money, to manifest this, to get more possessions, to get more houses, to get more cars. And you get success without fulfillment. Only self-realization and realizing the self can lead to permanent fulfillment, peace, and happiness, because that's your very nature. And once you realize this and understand this without understanding as it transcends the mind and is beyond the mind, you will have that fulfillment. Other than that, everything is just a taste. It's just a taste, and eventually that unfulfillment, that sadness, that opposite of that heightened emotion will come back until the self is realized. And even then, it does come and go, but you can abide as the observer, the witness within, and actually observe those emotions come and go while you're in that permanent, serene peace state of happiness. What is finesse or flow or acceptance or non-resistance? So finesse is not laziness, it's precision with awareness. So finesse says, let me understand why I feel this way. What is the resistance teaching me? What happens if I work with myself instead of against it? Finesse comes from observation, not judgment. Instead of forcing confidence, you remove what's causing insecurity. Instead of forcing motivation, you align your environment, energy, and intention. Self-realization doesn't happen when you overpower yourself. It happens when you see yourself clearly. And so this is finesse, this is flow, this is acceptance, this is non-resistance. And a very easy way to understand this is if you have a headache, for example. Everyone gets a headache, whether you're dehydrated, whether maybe you got the flu or something. Maybe you're overexcited, or you're just got off a plane, you're jet lagged, so you get a headache. So what would force versus finesse or force versus flow look like? Force or resistance is another word for force. So you're trying to force yourself to force that headache to go away. So you have this internal dialogue saying, I don't want this headache. I want this to go away. I don't want this headache. I want this to go away. Go away, go away. And so you have this subtle subconscious resistance at play. And this is really prominent in most afflictions we get. We have this subconscious, subtle resistance towards whatever we get. So with finesse or flow, you accept how you're feeling, even though you're doing your best to maybe get medication or take care of yourself. You're not resisting in the moment. And finesse or flow or acceptance or non-resistance would just, you would allow the headache to be there, and you would not fight it. You would just observe it and let it be. And by doing that, and this can apply to anything and everything, you reduce and let go of that resistance towards that. And that lets off some steam from the headache, and you actually feel better. And you could do this with anything. The body, of course, we're gonna have pain, but it is the mind that increases that pain and adds a suffering component to it. We can drop that suffering component by finesse, by flow, by non-resistance, by acceptance. And so the part that nobody talks about, when you stop forcing, there's another thing that happens. Your ego fights back, because force gives the ego a job. Struggle gives identity. Pain gives meaning. How often do we see this in those videos, those social media videos of those guys that are running 100 miles and they're just, they have a broken leg and they just keep going and going, and it gives them meaning, it gives them a sense of identity. But when finesse or flow or acceptance or non-resistance enters, the mind panics. If I stop pushing, it says, I'll fall behind. If I stop fighting, I'll become nothing. This is the retaliation from the ego or the mind. Self-realization threatens the identity built on effort, suffering, and proving. And that discomfort, that's not failure, that's a threshold. So you can look in your life and see if there's an identity built upon effort, built upon suffering, and built upon proving something. And for most people, this is generally, there's something going on with that we need to prove something, that we need to suffer. We need, if someone treats you bad, that we deserve this suffering. Or if, you're really going after something, you want to be successful, or you're doing some physical thing, then you want to prove something to someone. Maybe as a kid, you didn't feel good enough, or your parents did something, or someone else did something, and so you have that. And so a lot of this stuff just goes on in the subconscious, if you could, or the unconscious. But if you could be aware of this, and you could even write things down, if any of those, you can apply any of those to you, and see where you can let go, or you can finesse, or you can flow your way through those. And then the shift, so self-realization happens when you notice this. You were never meant to dominate yourself. You are meant to understand yourself. You're meant to realize yourself. You're meant to know thyself. So force asks, how do I become better? Finesse asks, what am I not seeing? And the moment you ask the second question, clarity replaces the pressure, and direction replaces the anxiety. Growth becomes natural instead of violent. You stop chasing transformation and you start allowing it. So there's a difference between chasing transformation, chasing self-realization, and allowing it. Self-realization is just the realization and just the allowing of what you already are. So stop resisting, stop doing things that counter the flow, which is force, resistance, and go with finesse, flow, non-resistance, acceptance. And so as we go a little bit further, if you're exhausted, if self-improvement feels like self-punishment, if you're doing everything right but feel disconnected, maybe the answer isn't more force. Maybe it's flow, maybe it's finesse, maybe it's awareness. Maybe it's finally realizing that you don't need to fight yourself to become yourself. And so if that resonated with you, sit with it. Don't rush to apply it. Just notice where you're forcing in life. And if you want more videos like this, subscribe, like, and let me know in the comments, where in life are you pushing instead of accepting and aligning and flowing. And that's it. Thank you for being here.